It's been said those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. It's safe to say that Good Friday 1989 will forever live in the memory of Alaskans. The oil spill prevention course charted by the state since is designed to prevent another Exxon Valdez.
Right here, we pull these surface rocks away, and there's still shiny oil in here. It's mobile oil. It's not hardened yet. It hasn't turned into a asphalt. In fact, it looks pretty similar to what it did in late summer even.
Results of a state fall survey of virtually every area affected by the spill conducted after Exxon shut down cleanup operations in 1989 revealed 117 miles of shoreline still suffering from oil contamination. Despite the best efforts of Mother Nature, many problems remain.
Well, there's a lot of oil in Prince William Sound yet. The cleanup last summer got some of it. The weather during the winter got some of it. But there's an awful lot of it left right here on the beach. You can see it. And if you can't see it, you can dig into the ground for a few inches, and there it is. So we've got a lot of work left to do.
The oil spill's consequences are still evolving. Preliminary laboratory and field studies indicate damage to fish, wildlife, and ecosystems in spill-hit areas. Abnormalities have been found in up to 90% of the herring larvae collected near oiled shorelines in Prince William Sound. In 3 oiled salmon spawning streams, where there normally would be tens of thousands of salmon eggs or juvenile forms, biologists this spring have been unable to find a single egg or fry. It's suspected, but not yet proven, that oil causes abnormalities and reduces a species' ability to reproduce. Alaska has committed $10 million to conducting more than 3 dozen damage assessment studies ranging from oil's effect on pink salmon eggs to injuries to brown and black bear which digest oily food. In addition, Exxon and the federal government have been conducting a wide range of scientific studies into the environmental impact of the oil spill. Since October, the state has been negotiating with Exxon to release all scientific data about the spill. Oil shipping operations in Alaska have never been the same since the Exxon Valdez captain radioed that his ship had gone aground.
We fetched up hard ground north of Goose Island on Fly Reef.
Shortly after the spill, through emergency orders now part of a permanent contingency plan, the Cooper administration stiffened requirements on Alyeska Pipeline Service Company to effectively respond to oil spills. Alyeska must now have at least 30,000 feet of sea boom on hand at all times, the ability to recover oil from the water at a rate of 10,000 barrels an hour, the ability to transfer oil from a stricken tanker at a rate of 10,000 barrels an hour, and sufficient lightering, storage, and transfer equipment to accommodate those recovery rates. Alyeska must boom all tankers upon their arrival in Valdez and inspect boomed areas hourly for spills. In addition, outgoing tankers must be escorted by 2 tugs to Hinchinbrook entrance. Licensed pilots must remain on outgoing tankers to a point past Bly Reef. There's now an alcohol testing program in place for tanker workers, and as part of standard operating procedure, Alyeska now maintains a 24-hour oil response crew of at least 12 persons. Less than 2 months after the spill, the state passed legislation placing responsibility for oil spill cleanup costs and damages on those who economically benefit from commercial production and use of oil or hazardous substances. The governor also signed legislation imposing a 5-cent per barrel surcharge on oil to fund a $50 million oil and hazardous substance release response fund. State civil fines for oil spills have increased 5-fold.
The title of our report is Spill, the Wreck of the Exxon Valdez, which spells out the problem, I think, very graphically.
In January 1990, the Alaska Oil Spill Commission, created by Governor Cooper, made public the results of its investigation into the Exxon Valdez and recommended a number of ways to make Alaska and all states safer from the threat of spills. That report is the foundation for state legislation introduced this year that would strengthen the Department of Environmental Conservation's authority to require and enforce spill contingency plans, impose criminal liability on individuals for acts done in the name of a company, create the new crime of negligent tanker operation, raise the penalties for violations of environmental laws depending on the amount of substance spilled, give courts the discretion to fine up to twice the amount of a spill's damage, impose new penalties for the drunken operation of vessels, improve state access to oil facilities, permit state administrative penalties, and cease and desist orders against polluters, as well as permit DEC environmental audits.
But when this comes again, it won't come in the same context. Something else will happen. There'll be a blowout in an offshore platform or some similar type of situation. And I think that we need to be prepared for a federal response that is organized, in which there is a clear command structure and where we know for dead certain where the necessary equipment is and the necessary personnel that we need and where the materials are.
Governor Cooper's testimony before Congress shortly after the spill played an integral role in the crafting of the Federal Oil Spill Liability and Compensation Act of 1989. Congress concurred with Cooper's proposal to establish the creation of a $1 billion fund to respond to oil spills in the future. Congress also went along with Cooper's recommendations that a worldwide computer inventory of spill equipment and cleanup experts be established, and that all tankers be required to have equipment and trained personnel on board to deal with large spills the moment they happen. The governor still strongly supports direct participation by the state in determining when a spill is clean and having the Coast Guard automatically take charge of large spills. Also, Alaska supports the requirement that oil tankers be equipped with double hulls and double bottoms to reduce the risk of spills. One Coast Guard study showed that the Exxon Valdez would have lost about 60% less oil if it had been equipped with a double hull. The state of Alaska is one of more than 150 plaintiffs who have filed civil suits against Exxon and Alyeska as the result of the oil spill. Alaska is seeking damages to compensate for harm to state resources and provide funds for environmental restoration. Alaska successfully led the fight against a plea bargain agreement between Exxon and the Justice Department that would have imperiled the civil suits against Exxon by terminating state and federal cooperation in the damage assessment and restoration process. There have been innumerable challenges presented by the oil spill, offsetting negative publicity that could adversely affect tourism and the marketing of state seafood, and providing additional human services to communities afflicted by the spill, just to name a few. Perhaps the greatest challenge of all still lies before us, the commitment to do everything possible to remove that oil. The debate has begun over which cleanup method should be used this year. The state believes it's going to take a variety of methods to do the job. The ultimate goal is long-term recovery and restoration of resources, not short-term results. So long as fishermen risk losing their catch, subsistence fishing game are in jeopardy, and popular recreation areas are threatened, the cleanup must continue. The task will be accomplished not by expediency, but through perseverance.
There's no way I could call this area a clean beach.
The wreck of the Exxon Valdez makes a pretty strong case for requiring future oil tankers to have double hulls and to phase in over the course of several years double bottoms and hulls on the United States oil tanker fleet. Had the Exxon Valdez been equipped with a double hull last March, the Coast Guard estimates that up to 60% less oil, about 6 million gallons, would have polluted Prince William Sound. The Alaska Oil Spill Commission, an independent panel appointed by the governor to investigate last year's spill and come up with ways to make sure another Exxon Valdez never happens again, strongly recommends that the U.S. oil tanker fleet be equipped with double hulls, and the Cooper administration supports that view. A House-passed bill now before the U.S. Senate would require all oil tankers currently operating to have double bottoms within 7 years and double hulls within 15 years. Any new tankers would have to be built with double hulls. Meanwhile, more than 117 miles of shoreline stretching from Prince William Sound to Kodiak remain moderately to heavily oiled, much of which will require treatment in the spring.
We didn't know what we'd expect to find, but we certainly found a lot of oil in the environment. For instance, when we were taking water samples of interstitial water, we would dig a hole, a pit, and it would fill with interstitial water, the water that exists between the granules of the matrix. When the pit filled, the water was black, and when you held up a sample bottle full of this water, it was actually black. So you don't have to be, you don't have to carry out analytical work to show that there is a considerable amount of oil persisting in these sediments.
Oil penetration in many areas ranges between 6 inches to more than 2 feet deep. Rough winter weather has cleaned the surface of some beaches, but generally subsurface oil doesn't get washed away. Not only are there more than 117 miles of shoreline with oil still on it, but trash and oily debris left behind by summer cleanup crews has been identified at 421 locations in Prince William Sound and the Gulf of Alaska area. This refuse includes fuel dumps, pom-poms, absorbent pads, and various other cleanup equipment. There's little doubt that a cleanup effort will need to resume this summer. To what extent and the type of treatment depends on how much oil remains come spring and how resources like fish-producing streams and subsistence foodstuff are affected.
Alyeska Pipeline Service Company operates the Trans-Alaska Pipeline on behalf of 7 oil companies that own the facilities. Their activities are monitored by the State Department of Environmental Conservation, which is charged with enforcing environmental regulations governing those operations. Within days after the grounding of the Exxon Valdez, an emergency order was put into effect by DEC. Its purpose was twofold. First, it invoked immediate measures to reduce the likelihood of another spill and improve response capability in the event of one. And secondly, it required Alyeska to develop an improved contingency plan for the state's review and approval. A contingency plan describes in detail the measures needed to be taken to contain and clean up an oil spill. After reviewing Alyeska's revised plan, state environmental officials felt it did not address many important areas.
In some cases it was inadequate, in other cases it was incomplete. We feel that the plan must demonstrate the ability to clean up spills in all weather and sea states that exist in Prince William Sound.
Alyeska has not yet developed a realistic worst-case scenario, nor have they explained how they would accomplish the minimum required by the state, containing and cleaning up a spill of 10.5 million gallons, nearly the size of the Exxon Valdez spill, within 48 hours. If by December 31st the company's revised plan fails to address these and other concerns, the state will finish writing the plan and the company will be forced to operate within its terms. Under state direction, tanker operation conditions in Prince William Sound are improving. For example, round-the-clock oil spill response crews and vessels are located at the terminal. Containment boom, placed around tankers as they are docked at the terminal, is inspected hourly for spills. Tugboats and oil spill response vessels accompany tankers leaving the terminal until they have reached open waters. Stockpiles of cleanup equipment such as containment boom and chemical dispersants are warehoused in key areas of Prince William Sound and Cook Inlet. Regular preparedness exercises are also taking place so that response crews are ready to mobilize quickly and efficiently in the event of a spill. Tankers operating in Alaskan waters are required to have a state-approved spill response plan in place that delineates a clear line of responsibility and outlines exactly how they would contain and clean up a spill. This requirement was put to the test in October when a Unocal tanker operating without a spill plan was denied permission to dock by state officials.
Choices that we make when we decide how to regulate activity that could be harmful if it goes astray are sometimes tough ones. But in this instance, I think the choice is pretty straightforward. Here we have crude oil moving from Prince William Sound into Cook Inlet for refining. We need to make sure that that product coming in is contained safely in the tanker, and that if there is any spill of any kind, that the capacity is right there to deal with it. Not days away, not under some plan that has to be invented on the spot, but that the planning has already been done so that we know that there's not a gap and we know the coverage is there.
The state of Alaska has developed a 5-point winter plan. It includes funding and assisting in local cleanup projects, tracking and monitoring oil movement during the winter, providing for protection of key fish hatcheries, research and development of new environmentally sound cleanup techniques for use in the spring, and creation of a strike team of mental health professionals to help Alaskans cope with stress-related problems. Additionally, there is ongoing review of state and federal spill legislation. A key element of any new legislation is the need to provide for a strong state role in spill response. Governor Cooper has approved more than $6 million to communities affected by the oil spill. The funds will be used primarily for local winter cleanup projects selected by the communities themselves.
We felt all along that the local communities that were affected by the oil spill ought to have a chance to help clean up during the winter. We don't want to jeopardize anybody's lives or their safety, but on good days, we want people to be able to go up and clean up the oil and the water as best we can.
The state's approach is to utilize the knowledge and expertise of local people so there will be a more thorough and effective cleanup effort in their areas. After Exxon cleanup operations were discontinued on September 15th, oil wasn't the only thing still desecrating the shores. Ironically, materials originally used for mopping up and containing the oil now litter beaches in Prince William Sound. Non-biodegradable absorbent pom-poms cling to trees and wash ashore in large clumps. Plastic bags, absorbent pads, hard hats, and an abandoned fuel dump still clutter some shorelines. During the cleanup, workers treated the beach surfaces, and as a result, some beaches look cleaner. But storms and tidal action continue to cause oil from below the surface to form heavy sheens in some areas of Prince William Sound. Previously treated beaches are being re-oiled, and shorelines that escaped contamination in the wake of the Exxon Valdez disaster now face new threats posed by the floating sheens of subsurface oil. Area wildlife is also threatened. Woodland animals foraging for food on polluted beaches are in danger of ingesting crude oil, which could result in sickness and death.
One rotten dead otter wrapped up in a pile of oily pom-poms.
This is pom-pom here.
These pictures, taken after the September 15th pullout, indicate that oil still endangers the animal population of Prince William Sound. In the minds of some, the oil spill is over. But while the story may not be in the national headlines anymore, thousands of Alaskans continue to be affected by a very real and ongoing tragedy.
It's Valdez back. We've should be on the radar there. We've fetched up hard ground north of Goose Island, Fly Reef, and evidently leaking some oil.
It hit the beaches, and now it's sneaking around here. It's like a black, slimy evil.
There's a lot of places there that look clean, and you go up and kick a couple inches of sand off with your foot, and then you start finding this moose patties.
It's everywhere. You can take a walk, and you want to walk back up in that river about a quarter of a mile, and there's oil back up in there. Areas you wouldn't even think there'd be oil. Way back up in there by fresh waterfall, there's oil.
When the workers were down here, they just removed the oil off the surface of the rocks. And they didn't get all of that. There's still a lot of rocks that are black with oil down here. If you dig into the sediments, the oil will flow from the sediments in here. So the subsurface is still contaminated and the surface is contaminated also.
What we hope to do is clean all the oil from the beach. We do not want to treat a beach. We don't accept that word. It's not in our vocabulary. We want to clean the whole beach.
If you don't believe it, look for yourself. This beach on Knight Island is one of the infamous Dirty Dozen, 12 treated beaches chosen to illustrate how much more work there is to be done and why the cleanup must continue. To give up now would mean failure, and that just isn't what Alaska is all about.
I think most people believe that Exxon should do more work in terms of cleaning up the beaches. There is a point at which we have to leave this beach and every other beach in Prince William Sound because of the winter. But we ought not to foreclose the possibility that we can do a whole lot to improve this situation next year.
Here are the facts. 257,000 barrels of oil gushed from the Exxon Valdez March 24th. Since then, approximately 32,500 barrels have been recovered. It's estimated 30% of the total spilled, some 77,000 barrels of oil, has evaporated, meaning that there's as much as 147,000 barrels of oil unaccounted for from the Exxon Valdez. A lot of that muck is buried in our beaches, and while Exxon is ready to throw up their hands and call it quits, the state of Alaska's efforts have just begun, and we're not about to let our people down.
We're not just going to complain about the fact that Exxon left this spill early. We're going to do everything we can in a very active way to produce the results that we think need to be produced over the winter. We're reaching out a hand to Exxon and saying, join us in this. But even if Exxon chooses not to do that, we're going to link arms with the local people and do whatever we can to make this a more effective cleanup with steps taken during the winter and in preparation for an aggressive and carefully tailored effort in the spring.
Alaska's winter cleanup operations plan is five-fold, beginning with local response projects, agreements between the state and local communities to conduct cleanup, waste disposal, diversionary booming, and protective measures. Nobody knows for sure what the effects of winter weather will be on the spilled oil, and so monitoring and assessment, tracking the movement of the oil and the changes in its composition will be carried out by both state and local governments. Large support vessels will be employed in key areas to protect hatcheries. They too will conduct some cleanup and monitoring as well as waste disposal. Technology review and testing with an emphasis on practical and mechanical cleanup means will play an integral role in Alaska's winter operations. The technology review will focus on specific problems such as subsurface oil recovery so that by next spring Alaska has new weaponry in its cleanup arsenal. And finally, there's a community health outreach program. a strike force of mental health and family workers that will be in the field to provide counseling, crisis intervention, domestic violence prevention, and substance abuse counseling and treatment. It's important to note that Alaska is not in a legal position to fully assume responsibility for or management of the spill cleanup. The winter program is designed to supplement the cleanup effort already put forth and to lay the foundation necessary for resuming the cleanup next spring. Take a look at these beaches shot just 4 days before the Exxon withdrawal. And bear in mind, these are treated beaches, members of the Dirty Dozen. Anybody would be hard-pressed to defend their environmental stability.
The majority of the beaches that are out here that have been cleaned still have a lot of oil in them, and there's no question they're still dirty. Some of them will look clean when they're originally cleaned, and within a matter of a few weeks they'll look dirty again. I think there are a few examples, but very few, where you can go in and say, hey, this probably is going to be clean enough to allow normal organisms to repopulate it. But there aren't very many beach segments out there that are in that condition.
Avoiding further environmental damage during the cleanup is a legitimate concern, but the fact is cleanup operations can proceed with minimal adverse impact.
I would not agree that all that can be done has been done. There are many techniques that haven't been tried yet and that need to be evaluated. We think that the winter is an excellent time to look at the methods that have been used, to do a critical evaluation, research and development, and then let's put together a more effective package that is flexible enough so it can be used in shoreline segments where it's not a good idea to use some of the techniques that have been applied.
Exxon has put forth a good faith cleanup effort and made an enormous commitment in personnel, equipment, money, and other corporate resources. The Cooper administration is committed to working in cooperation with Exxon. Governor Cooper has met with Exxon Chairman Lawrence Rawl and discussed further cleanup activities. Meanwhile, the struggle for survival continues in Prince William Sound. A hermit crab is unable to scale an oily rock just 72 hours prior to the Exxon pullout. We share in its frustration, and with or without Exxon, Alaska is moving forward in its cleanup effort. Following the grounding of the Exxon Valdez, the immediate effects of the spill on the geography and wildlife in Prince William Sound were evident. But only now, more than 5 months later, is the toll on the human population becoming known. As the slick grew, so too did the alarming statistics. A recent survey by the Alaska Department of Health and Social Services shows that those communities with substance abuse programs have seen admissions double since the spill. In Cordova, for instance, mental health referrals are up 28%. In Kodiak, up 50%. In Homer, where domestic violence has increased 1,000%, city officials, healthcare professionals, and residents are coping with a disaster that doesn't seem to end.
You don't know if the fishermen are going to be fishing. You don't know what the economy is going to do. You don't know what property values are going to do. You don't know whether more oil is going to come into the bay.
And in the month of July so far, we've had a 114% increase in our referrals. I believe that has to do with the oil spill, with uncertainty, with unemployment.
Our crimes of violence have increased substantially. It's not only assaults and things of that nature. We're having a lot more domestic disputes. We're having a lot more bar fights.
People just don't realize what it's like to have your whole livelihood jeopardized, not just 1 year, but maybe the next 5 years.
I haven't gone down to the beaches. I haven't gone down to look, because I have to keep it together to deal with people here in the agency, and that's hard.
Emotionally, it's been a real travesty. I've had a recurring nightmare since the end of April. Since the first time I sat down on a beach and had oil up to my knees. I haven't slept more than 4 hours in any one night for the last 4 months.
This is the third largest man-made disaster outside of wartime in the entire history of the human race. This is surpassed outside of wartime only by Bhopal and Chernobyl. this is going to have some very, very long-term scars on the people that live here.
The state of Alaska has developed a strike force of mental health and family counseling workers that will be in the field most of this winter. The lesson for other states in preparing for a disaster of this kind is to do a considerable amount of contingency planning for humans as well as wildlife and the environment. When the Exxon Valdez started gushing 260,000 barrels of oil, no one could have predicted its slick would eventually extend some 600 miles, way beyond Prince William Sound. Likewise, no one could have predicted its devastation on wildlife, especially birds.
We know that this spill has killed more birds than any other oil spill in the history of oil transportation.
To date, there are 4 semi-trailers full of dead birds. They're kept refrigerated and will eventually be used as evidence during litigation. 74 species of birds have been hit by the oil spill. The Fish and Wildlife Service has documented more than 31,000 dead birds, which they say represents just between 10 and 30% of the total number, meaning that as many as 270,000 birds were probably killed. It's expected to take up to 70 years for the bird populations to totally recover in spill areas. Sea otters have proven to be the most susceptible marine mammal to the oil.
Otters that get exposed to that oil, they have to do constant grooming, and oil could be either absorbed through the skin, but a lot of it was ingested. When they were defecating, they'd be defecating early on, just it looked like crude oil, just passing right through.
Thus far, there are 966 documented sea otter deaths out of an estimated 3,000 otters inhabiting the spill area in the Sound. Biologists can't say for sure how long it will take for the otter population to recover. 137 bald eagle deaths can be attributed to the oil spill. Eagles mate for life, and there are about 2,000 pairs in Prince William Sound. Of those, this summer, 65% have experienced what is known as egg failure, the inability to produce offspring. The eggs of bald eagles are extremely susceptible to even small amounts of oil.
When an adult returns back to the nest that have a little bit of feathers that have oil on it, just a little bit of that oil on the feathers, when they sit back on the nest, it would kill the egg, and then that would be considered egg failure because the fetus inside would die.
An Eagle Rehabilitation Center has been established in Anchorage to take care of oil-sick bald eagles. There, volunteers work with the eagles to prepare them for their return to the wild or to be placed somewhere in captivity for life. Even then, though, not all of them will make it.
The problem with eagles is the males tend to be more spirited. We do have one that we were trying to work with, and his spirit is just so wild that unfortunately I don't think we'll be able to tame him at all or even get him so that he's tolerant of people.
Biologists predict that the oil will continue to take its toll on wildlife. So long as there is oil on beaches, they say, there will be animals dying from it. Just outside of Homer at Mars Cove, 200 miles away from where the Exxon Valdez ran aground, a cleanup crew works diligently to restore this beach to its natural state. The Homer Area Recovery Coalition, or HARC, is coordinating the effort. HARC is operating under a $100,000 grant from the state of Alaska, which is encouraging its citizens to devise new ways to clean beaches without harming the environment. While Exxon has set its own standards for beach cleanliness, HARC workers seek to establish higher standards.
We feel that it's important that somebody else goes out there and tries to set some different standards, hopefully better standards. There were some days where we had 12 people on a beach and Exxon had 12 people on a beach. We recovered 5 times as much oil as they did.
HARC maintains that Exxon's hot water method of hosing beaches only washes the tops of the rocks, leaving oil below the surface of the beach untouched. These deposits then rise to the surface, re-oiling already treated beaches.
What we hope to do is clean all the oil from the beach. We do not want to treat a beach. We don't accept that word. It's not in our vocabulary. We want to clean the whole beach.
At Mars Cove, the beach has been divided into sections. The entire top layer of each section is removed and placed into a homemade rock washing machine. The rocks and gravel are then sprayed on both sides with pressurized hot water. The resulting mixture of oily water flows into a separator tank. There, the oil floats to the surface where it's skimmed off and collected in buckets for disposal. The clean rocks are then returned to the same section of beach from where they were removed. HARC began as a wildlife recovery operation during the early days of the spill, but has since attracted concerned volunteers from all over the world who simply want to help clean up oily beaches.
I use mostly a car in Switzerland. I use also a car here in the United States. And I think in this kind I'm also responsible for this disaster.
I feel like I'm just helping Mother Earth clean herself. I'm Earth too, I'm Mother Earth too, so when I help physically clean with my hands, it just seems to be the only thing I could be doing with my life right now.
I'm not really an industry basher. I'm more of a type of person that likes to get people to really care and love the earth more, and that's what I'm here for. Just trying to take care of a little beach one step at a time.
While volunteer labor and low-tech oil removal solutions may result in cleaner beaches at Mars Cove, the fate of hundreds of miles of Alaska's coastline still stained with oil remains uncertain. Snug Harbor on Knight Island in Prince William Sound suffered a direct hit from the Exxon Valdez oil. Despite the best efforts of cleanup workers, the beaches on Knight Island remain black and sticky. There's renewed hope, though, in a process called bioremediation.
We're just encouraging Mother Nature what it would normally have done over a longer period of time. So at the end of either this season or sometime in the spring, we'll have to come back and assess how clean that beach is and what type of treatment process should now be done to it, if any.
Environmental Protection Agency scientists are on site in Valdez analyzing the results of bioremediation applications thus far. Essentially, bioremediation uses fertilizer to stimulate the appetite of bacteria present in Prince William Sound. That bacteria then goes to work dispersing the oil by breaking down its molecular structure. The initial results are encouraging. Bioremediation was used on this strip of Snug Harbor Beach in June, and 2 weeks later the rocks on the surface were virtually free of oil.
When you walk down the beach about half a mile here, you can see a section of the beach we sprayed earlier in the week, and you can see the visible results. It's cleaner already. It's been less than a week. So as far as I could tell, it's working.
EPA Chief William Riley was visibly moved by what he saw.
It was a wholly different experience to come back here now and see something beginning to work to deal with this really horrible problem. I think it's encouraging. It's some of the real good news that's coming out of Prince William Sound.
Exxon officials are quick to caution that bioremediation isn't a cure-all when it comes to oil removal. Conventional methods are still required.
Bioremediation is not the panacea to all the problems with oil-impacted areas. Bioremediation ought to be looked at as another tool in the grab bag. There are a number of tools that we use for shoreline cleaning, ranging from manual, hot water mechanical, cold water flushing, and bioremediation. It's an important tool because it doesn't take a lot of physical effort to apply to the shoreline, and important too because what it's doing is take a natural process and speeding it up. We're just helping Mother Nature along.
Bioremediation requires wave and tidal agitation to mix the fertilizer with the bacteria. The challenge facing cleanup experts is how to make the process work in the calm waters of the many sheltered bays and lagoons of Prince William Sound. Had there been no Exxon Valdez oil spill, the world may never have known Corexit. Corexit is similar to kerosene, but without the smell. Exxon developed Corexit in direct response to the Exxon Valdez disaster.
It's been formulated to meet a couple of objectives. One is low toxicity, so it won't be harmful to the ecology, and the other is to minimize dispersion, meaning breaking the oil up into tiny droplets. The objective is to have the oil mobilized down the shoreline to the intertidal zone, and then float on top of the water and then be picked up by skimmers.
Corexit is being tested along the shoreline of 4 islands in Prince William Sound. Workers spray the beaches with Corexit and then wait about 15 minutes. They then hose the beach down, allowing the oil to float out into the water, and from there, skimmers scoop it up.
The coated oil off of the rock. The oil has become very weathered now, and in the normal process of cleaning the surfaces, we're spending quite a bit of time pounding it with hot water and high-pressure hoses, and this is an attempt to see if a more passive approach, like chemically relieving it, would allow less time on the beach as well as more improved oil recovery.
Corexit is the latest in a long line of creative ideas to remove oil from Prince William Sound beaches. A concerned homemaker wrote Alaska's governor recommending vinegar and water, and one gentleman suggested deploying flamethrowers. According to Exxon, though, Corexit works.
This is a rock off the beach that we just treated. This is the top part that was sprayed with the Corexit 9580, and that was then sprayed with the warm water wash, and that's the bottom of the rock. The bottom and the top looked alike.
Lab results on the effectiveness and how environmentally safe Corexit is are still pending. The Coast Guard, along with state officials, are expected to make a final decision on the widespread usage of Corexit by early next week.
The village of English Bay is perched on the tip of the Kenai Peninsula, 200 miles south of Valdez. It's one of several communities whose main sources of food are fishing and subsistence gathering, activities that have been curtailed since the oil spill. Although Exxon has supplied canned food, much of it is going unused because it's not the food that residents traditionally eat.
It really hurts everybody here. All them smokehouses are empty here. All steam comes right into the lagoon entrance over there. And, you know, we do pick a lot of seafoods down there. We don't trust them now. We don't want to take a chance. Elderly people, you know, sometimes you go up to them and they'd be angry, you know. They want their native food back, you know. They don't want that money, and sometimes it's hard to talk to them, you know.
450 miles away in southeast Alaska, Angoon residents untouched by the spill have launched a major effort to gather 10,000 pounds of subsistence food for shipment to oiled villages. The Sea Team project, sponsored by the State Department of Community and Regional Affairs, Exxon, the City of Angoon, and the Tlingit-Haida Regional Indian Council, is a summer youth employment program. Village elders instruct their young people in the traditional ways of subsistence gathering, hunting, and fishing.
Some people are really devastated, you know, more so than other people are, and I'm just glad it never happened to us, and I feel pretty good about it. I'm getting paid really well for it, but, you know, I think if it really came down to it, I'd do it anyway for not with any money.
One of the major importances of the food is that I think it's a shared cultural heritage that the native villages in Alaska, subsistence people in general, gather food from the land. Although these are different tribes in the different villages, we have different tribes here and there are different tribes in those villages, it gives us that we have a shared responsibility, I think, and a shared stake in the spill, and I think this reflects it.
Lack of subsistence food could be dangerous. Psychologists believe there's potential for serious depression in those villages hit by the spill, due in part to vitamin deficiencies resulting from a dramatic change in diet and the lack of cultural activities revolving around subsistence food gathering and preparation.
It's a loss of a way of life. It's hard for people to understand that. They think that we have a choice between the foods that we gather and prepare or going to the store. That isn't so. I think we prefer the foods that we gather and prepare, only because of the social activity, our way of life, the way we interact with each other. If you take that away, they can never go out and buy what they've lost.
When the oil tanker Flying Clipper approached the Nikiski refining terminal on the Kenai Peninsula in Cook Inlet, it was met by some 20 fishing vessels that had formed a blockade refusing its entry into port. The fishermen, calling themselves Frustrated Independent Salmon Harvesters, or FISH, are trying to create pressure on oil companies in hopes of getting a serious oil cleanup effort in Cook Inlet underway. The group's fishing season was officially closed last week due to oil from the Exxon Valdez. 2 years ago, it was the same story when a smaller oil spill in Cook Inlet ruined their season, depriving them of a living. As the tanker approached the blockade, the captain radioed the Coast Guard asking for instructions what to do.
Okay, I've got a maneuver to keep from hitting these docks, and if I have a choice, it'll be either the boat or the dock.
Captain, I understand that. People have been warned. They're playing chicken with you now is the best way to put it. Go ahead and proceed slowly and plan on a tie-up.
When the people that own these oil companies can stand on the dock and tell a pilot or a skipper of a huge boat like the Flying Clipper tonight, just keep going regardless of the people in front of it, just run over them. He didn't say run over them, but he said just keep it coming. So what's the difference? I mean, 3 seconds, and he would have killed 4 people tonight.
Nikiski, located some 300 miles from where the Exxon Valdez went aground, is outside of the area Exxon has said it is willing to clean up. Therefore, very little is being done to handle the massive volume of oil that has polluted Cook Inlet.
It hit the beaches, and now it's sneaking around here. It's like a black, slimy evil. It's affecting more and more lives all the way, and Exxon is going to have to pay the piper.
I don't see him talking to anyone. I don't see him interviewing anyone. I don't see him visiting anyone to find out how much harm they have done. It's disgusting.
They've left us up in the air as far as any other work we can do. I can't, as far as I know to this date, go to the shoe store and sell shoes because they want to mitigate that money that I make and take it off of the compensation that they're offering me. I can't work for fishing, and I can't work other than fishing.
We need the state's backing. We need the backing of the Congress of the United States and the American people as well.
The fishermen of this region are not only concerned about this year's lost fishing season, but about future closures due to inadequate oil cleanup abilities, and they're at their wits' end.
And we just feel it's time to push back. The oil companies have pushed us in the corner. We got no place to go. We're broke. If somebody takes your livelihood away from you, you just have to fight. And I don't know how to fight. I mean, this is the only way I knew how to do it.
Nestled in the inlets and coves of Prince William Sound, cleanup crews labor to wash contaminated beaches. High-pressure hoses and mops help to remove surface oil, but tidal action and shifting sands cause deposits below the surface to re-oil beaches that have been previously treated. This beach on Green Island is one of the areas worked on most recently by cleanup crews, yet there is little difference between it and this untreated beach nearby. Exxon has announced plans to discontinue cleanup operations and begin pulling out September 15th. The Coast Guard, which is overseeing the cleanup, asked the company to submit a plan for demobilization, but state environmental officials feel the work is just starting.
I've written to Admiral Yost of the U.S. Coast Guard asking his help in making sure that Exxon sticks with the shoreline oil removal operation and the effort to get the oil out of the water. We need to make sure that that effort continues as long as weather conditions and safety considerations allow.
The state of Alaska is seeking Admiral Yost's assistance in obtaining a commitment from Exxon to maintain their presence in the spill area during the winter. In addition, they ask that an emergency strike force be retained to intercept oil slicks that threaten hatcheries or other sensitive areas, and that full-scale cleanup operations be resumed in the spring.
It's really important to get this job done right, and the only way to do that is to stick with it as long as possible this fall, do a thorough job of maintaining the progress over the winter and planning for an early startup in the spring.
Exxon declined to comment on their scheduled September pullout, so for now, the answer to how clean is a clean beach has yet to be determined. Dayville Road disposal site in Valdez is overflowing with bags of toxic oily waste gathered from Alaska's contaminated shoreline. Some burnable debris is disposed of here in small incinerators. The rest is transported to Alaska's North Slope or shipped to a disposal plant in Oregon. But the incinerators can't keep up with the demand, and mounting piles of toxic material have meant mounting headaches for Exxon. The company applied for permits to operate several large incinerator barges, but state officials have been reluctant to issue them until they are satisfied the floating incinerators will meet certain emission standards.
At the present time, we're not real impressed with the equipment that they've sent up here because we don't feel it's the best available. And we're in the process with EPA of developing performance criteria that those incinerators are going to have to meet before we would issue any permits.
The Dayville Road incinerators appear to be burning cleanly, but questions have been raised concerning their unseen toxic emissions. The state has not required the site to have a permit, but bigger incinerators burning tons more waste will require public review.
Wastes are being burned throughout the country, so there is technology available to burn these wastes properly, and we want to make sure that we have that same technology up here for the protections of the citizens of the state of Alaska.
Exxon asked the state to process the applications without public comment, but DEC officials insist on public hearings, saying that concern over air pollution is too great. Those public hearings begin next week in 5 Alaska cities and will play a significant role in deciding the fate of Exxon's proposed incinerator barges. Meanwhile, for workers at Dayville Road, the spill won't be over until the waste is gone.
It's true that in some areas the best thing to do is to just let nature take its course, but there are also certain areas in Prince William Sound where there's obviously heavy, thick oil still in the subsurface, and those areas are going to have to be treated later on and cleaned up. Otherwise, the oil will continue to leak out into the water and will have a pretty bad effect on wildlife and biological systems. I'm standing over a hole which has been dug, and there's a lot of oil in the subsurface that's obviously going to leach back out and get into the water when the winter storms are here. And I think that there are still a lot of areas in Prince William Sound that are fairly critical that are going to have to be addressed either this fall or next summer or both.
Appearances can be deceiving. After 2 summers of cleanup efforts and natural weathering, gravel and cobblestone beach segments that had been sticky with black oil may appear clean and natural. But just out of sight, under many of these beaches, substantial quantities of oil remain buried. Although Alaskans have the most at stake in seeing the oil removed, federal law gives the Coast Guard the last word on spill decisions, and the goals and opinions of the Coast Guard in the summer of 1990 often conflicted with what state agencies and local people felt was best for the shorelines and wildlife. Federal authorities are willing to leave large amounts of oil behind, while state and local officials want oil removed whenever possible. As was discovered this summer, often the best way to solve the problem was to simply dig up the oil, put it in bags, and haul it away. This beach, one of the most scenic spots in Kachemak State Park, got just that kind of treatment, proving that removal is both reasonable and practical when used in moderation and for specific reasons.
I don't think Mother Nature is going to take care of this in a timely fashion. I think I have a higher degree of expectation in this area than it may, say, on a beach in lower 48 where oil spills are been a part of history for a long time. These beaches were pristine. They had very little human intrusion over time, and I think to the general populace, it's critical that these beaches remain as natural as possible. That's why we created the state parks, and we have national park adjacent to us here.
The cleanup at Yalik was a success, but as the summer progressed, it became clear that the minimum federal standards for cleanup fell far short of what Alaskans felt was necessary. Late in the cleanup season, those differences were clearly illustrated at Ushagat Island, a wildlife refuge just off the southern tip of the Kenai Peninsula.
That's oil, real sticky,
and it just smears that oil with brown film.
Now you can see how the tide has lapped up against this berm and eroded the front of it away.
State officials wanted this oily mess dug up and hauled away, yet Coast Guard commanders decided to leave it on the beach. As you can see in this amateur video shot by state monitors, when high tide hit the contaminated berm, much of the oil washed back into the sea, creating a slick of more than 10 acres and contaminating area waterfowl, sometimes with fatal results. Even though there was some disagreement over cleanup techniques, generally the 1990 summer cleanup effort can be deemed a success, and state shoreline monitors deserve a lot of credit for that success. They advised cleanup crews of the state's priorities, reported the progress of the cleanup, and described the condition of each beach after crews departed. On numerous occasions, state monitors encouraged cleanup crews to conduct a more thorough job. For instance, this stretch of Knight Island, known as Montesano Beach, was treated 4 times after state monitor Peter Montesano steadfastly insisted that more oil could be removed. The reason? There are restrictions placed on cleanup workers.
But they're only allowed to do as much as they're told to do. There have been a couple times where I've jumped in with my shovel and trowels to do an area myself, which is dripping oil. Because the foreman came up to me and said, look, I've been told there's no oil there. And so I've done that myself. And that's been more than once. But they're doing as good a job as they're allowed to do.
There are numerous success stories. Many sites have come a long way from their condition a year ago. Some beaches where contamination was limited to tar balls or tar mats are entirely free of oil today. However, all it takes is one look at the now infamous Bay of Isles on Knight Island, shot just 1 week before the end of the 1990 cleanup season, to realize how much more can be accomplished. Alaska natives and other residents who subsist largely on food harvested from the sea and shore remain fearful that oil contamination has made their traditional foods unfit to eat.
Seeing something like this still remain after the second season, you just wonder about what the future holds. We're still going clear out of the Chuniga Bay area 40 miles to do subsistence hunting. This whole island. This is where we do a lot of deer hunting, a lot of seal hunting, and land otters. I don't see any land otters, certainly no sea otters.
Oil fuels a large part of the Alaska economy, but fishing and tourism are the biggest job producers in the state. Prince William Sound salmon catch was a record success in 1990. Tourism in the spill area rebounded this summer after a major upheaval in 1989. Much of that success is due to the diligence of cleanup operations. And as long as oil remains, even at reduced levels, targeted cleanup will further protect those vital industries. Large amounts of oil are trapped in the gravel along 2 miles of beach north of Point Helen on Knight Island, and preliminary data from a 128-mile survey in August shows that at least 61 miles of shoreline still have some oil remaining. The key is to not limit the number of cleanup techniques available.
We have a number of different tools that we can use. Manual pickup, mechanical removal, tilling of the beach, use of bioremediation. We ought to use all of those tools. We can use them in intelligent combinations to get the most out of them, but our objective should be to remove as much oil as we can.
So the cleanup must continue. Next year, the following year, and even after that, if that's what's required to bring the formerly undamaged Alaskan coastline back to a semblance of its former self. Then, when the cleanup is complete, actual restoration work can begin. Already, 3 state agencies are working in concert with federal scientists to test different approaches to restoration, transplanting native ryegrass onto damaged beaches, introducing limpets onto denuded shoreline rocks, and studying 2 species of ducks to see how dependent they are on upland areas above the contaminated shorelines. These are proactive and positive steps being taken to restore the sound, and it shows how well the federal and state governments can work together. The Coast Guard and Exxon should be commended for the progress made during the 1990 summer cleanup, and it's encouraging to know that they plan to take part in a new shoreline survey next spring and identify what work needs to be done where. It demonstrates a realization that the work accomplished so far has made a critical difference and needs to continue.